Welcome to Whispering Archives, where history doesn't just speak, it whispers across the centuries. In the summer of 64 AD, as the world slept beneath the Roman moon, a spark ignited a mystery that would echo through history. Flames rose, fear spread, and an emperor's name was carved into legend and infamy. This is the story of Nero and the fire that consumed Rome. Imagine the city of Rome, a sprawling metropolis, the heart of an empire. But it wasn't a city of marble and stone as we might picture. It was a city of wood, of narrow, winding alleys, of tightly packed apartment blocks called insulae, and bustling, crowded markets. It was a tinderbox, a disaster waiting to happen. And on the night of July 18th, in the year 64 AD, destiny arrived. Shortly after midnight, in the merchant shops surrounding the Circus Maximus, Rome's great chariot racing stadium, a fire began. Fanned by a strong summer wind, the flames didn't just spread, they exploded. They roared through the dry, wooden structures, leaping from building to building, devouring everything in their path. The fire raged for 6 days and 7 nights, a relentless, unstoppable inferno. By the time it was finally contained, 2/3 of the magnificent city lay in smoldering ruins. Thousands were left homeless, their lives turned to ash and rubble. The heart of the empire had been gutted, and a stunned world asked one simple question: how could this have happened? And what of the emperor? Where was Nero during this cataclysm? Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. Ruler, artist, performer, and, in the eyes of history, a villain. The story that has been passed down for 2 millennia is one of the ultimate acts of imperial indifference. The image is iconic: Emperor Nero, standing on a tower, resplendent in his robes, playing his lyre and singing of the fall of Troy while his capital city burned below. It's a powerful, damning portrait of a monstrous tyrant, a man so disconnected from his people as suffering that he used it as a backdrop for his own artistic whims. This is the legend, the story that cemented Nero's place in history as one of its most infamous figures. But is it the truth? The historical accounts, even those written by men who despised him, tell a different story. The historian Tacitus, our most detailed source for the fire, explicitly states that Nero was not in Rome when the fire broke out. He was at his villa in Antium, about 35 miles away. When news of the disaster reached him, he didn't stay away and compose poetry. He raced back to the city. Upon his return, Nero didn't seclude himself in his palace. Instead, he took immediate action. He opened his private gardens and the public buildings of the campus marshes to shelter the thousands of homeless refugees pouring into the safer parts of the city. He organized massive relief efforts, bringing in food supplies from surrounding towns and cutting the price of grain to prevent famine. He seemed to be a leader taking charge in a crisis. So where did the story of him fiddling while Rome burned come from? It likely emerged later, a potent piece of political propaganda crafted by his enemies. The lyre, the singing, it was a metaphor for his perceived narcissism and artistic obsessions. A rumor so compelling that it overshadowed all evidence to the contrary and became the story that survived. In the aftermath of the devastation, suspicion and rumor began to swirl through the ruined streets. As Nero unveiled his ambitious plans for rebuilding the city, those whispers grew louder. His new Rome would be different. It would be safer, more organized, and more beautiful. He decreed wider streets to act as fire breaks, mandated the use of fire-resistant materials like stone and brick, and required that buildings have their own courtyards and water sources. These were practical, forward-thinking urban planning reforms designed to prevent another such catastrophe. On the surface, it was the work of a responsible ruler. But there was one part of his plan that raised more than a few eyebrows: his own new palace. On a vast swath of land cleared by the fire, Nero began construction on a magnificent, sprawling complex he called the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. This was no ordinary palace. It was a masterpiece of architectural excess, featuring a colossal statue of himself, a massive artificial lake, revolving dining rooms, and walls adorned with gold leaf and precious gems. To the suffering populace, who had lost everything, this opulent project looked less like visionary reconstruction and more like a land grab. Was the fire a convenient tragedy that allowed him to build his dream palace? Or was it something more sinister? The rumor that had been whispered before was now shouted in the streets. Nero himself had started the fire. Why? To clear the land for his golden house, to inspire his poetry, or simply out of a mad, destructive impulse? The rational reforms were forgotten, overshadowed by the sheer audacity of the Domus Aurea. Was this visionary planning, or evidence of a hidden agenda? The political pressure on Nero was immense. The Roman people needed someone to blame for their suffering, and the rumors pointing to the emperor were not going away. He needed a scapegoat, a group that could be plausibly blamed, and whose punishment would satisfy the public's desire for vengeance. He found one in a small, misunderstood, and unpopular religious sect that was gaining a foothold in the city, the Christians. To the Romans, Christians were a strange and secretive group. They refused to worship the Roman gods or the emperor, which was seen as both impious and treasonous. Wild rumors circulated about them, accusing them of cannibalism, a misunderstanding of the Eucharist, and other depraved rituals. They were outsiders, an easy target. According to Tacitus, Nero arrested a few members of the sect, who under torture confessed whether truthfully or not, we'll never know, and then implicated a vast multitude of others. The punishment that followed was a spectacle of horrific cruelty, designed to be as public and terrifying as possible. Christians were dressed in animal skins and torn apart by dogs in the arena. They were crucified. Most famously, they were coated in pitch, tied to posts in Nero's gardens, and set ablaze to serve as human torches to light up the night. This brutal persecution did little to convince everyone of the Christians' guilt. In fact, Tacitus notes that the public, while believing the Christians deserved punishment for their hatred of the human race, began to feel a sense of pity for them, seeing them not as justly punished arsonists, but as victims of one man's personal cruelty. While the strategy may have deflected some blame in the short term, it ultimately backfired, forever sealing Nero's reputation as a bloodthirsty tyrant. So, who was the real Nero? A monster who burned his own city, or a flawed leader caught in an impossible situation? To understand the historical debate, we have to look at the sources. Our primary accounts of Nero's reign come from historians like Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio. All of them wrote decades after Nero's death, and all of them were members of the senatorial class, the aristocratic elite who had been locked in a power struggle with emperors since the days of August. U.S. And they despised Nero. They saw him as a populist tyrant who catered to the common people, a degenerate performer who shamed his office by appearing on stage, and a cruel autocrat who executed many of their peers. Their writings are filled with political bias and personal animosity. They readily reported the most scandalous rumors about him, painting a portrait of a madman. Many modern historians argue that we must read these ancient sources with extreme caution. They suggest that the Great Fire was almost certainly an accident, a tragic but inevitable consequence of Rome's urban layout. Nero, while perhaps a narcissistic and ruthless ruler in many respects, likely reacted to the fire as any leader would. His rebuilding plans were largely sensible, and the construction of the Golden House, while extravagant, was not out of character for a Roman emperor. The story of Nero the arsonist, they argue, was a powerful smear campaign launched by his political enemies, a rumor that took root and grew until it became historical fact. Was Nero truly a monster? Or was he a convenient villain for a tragedy that no one could fully explain, a scapegoat for both his time and for ours? The fire, the palace, the persecution, they all combined to destroy what was left of Nero's political capital. A few years later, facing rebellions from his governors and abandoned by his own guards, Nero took his own life, reportedly uttering the last words, "What an artist dies in me." But his story didn't end there. It morphed into a legend, a cautionary tale of tyranny and madness. The fire that burned Rome for a week in 64 AD created a rumor that has burned for 2,000 years. A rumor that has shaped our perception not just of one man, but of power, propaganda, and how history itself is written. The embers of that ancient blaze still glow, inviting us to look closer, to question the stories we are told, and to search for the truth buried beneath the ashes of the past. So tell us in the comments, was Nero the tyrant who watched Rome burn or the victim of history's longest burning rumor? What do you think really happened on that fateful night? Thank you for watching the Whispering Archives. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, where the past whispers, and we listen.